Have you ever had one of those small moments of pure joy or a feeling of deep gratitude and wished you could just bottle it up? Well, today we're going to talk about something fascinating. The idea that those fleeting, positive feelings can actually build a better life for you in the long run. We're diving into the science behind how it all works. But here's the big question, right? It feels a little weird to think about. How can a feeling that's here one minute and gone the next, like joy or contentment, actually have a lasting impact? It seems like a paradox. So how are these quick emotional sparks scientifically linked to some of the biggest things in our lives? And I'm not talking about small stuff here. The research is pretty clear. People who have these positive feelings more often, they tend to have stronger friendships, they actually make more money, they report being happier in their marriages, they have better physical health, and get this, they even live longer. So what is going on here? What's the secret sauce?
Well, the answer seems to come from this really powerful idea from a psychologist named Dr. Barbara Fredrickson. It's called the broaden and build theory.
So, the theory goes like this. Positive emotions do way more than just feel good. When you feel good, it literally broadens your mind. It opens you up to new ideas, new possibilities, new ways of seeing the world. And over time, being in that open-minded state helps you build real, lasting skills and strengths.
It really boils down to two simple steps. First, that good feeling comes along and it broadens your mindset. Then, because your mind is more open, you're in the perfect state to build new resources for your life. Things like learning a new skill, making a new friend, or just becoming more resilient. Think of it this way. Every little moment of positivity is like making a small deposit into a savings account for your own well-being. It just adds up over time.
Okay, so this all sounds fantastic in theory, but how in the world do you actually test this in a lab? I mean, you can't just tell people to be happy over and over again. It's really, really difficult, and it's because of this thing our brains do.
It's called the hedonic treadmill. We all have this tendency to just get used to stuff, Giving someone a piece of chocolate might work the first time, but if you do it every day, that little spark of joy starts to fade. The novelty wears off, and we just go back to our usual baseline level of happiness. And you can't build anything if those good feelings don't stick around.
So, to get around this problem, researchers needed a breakthrough. They needed a method that could help people generate positive feelings consistently, something that could actually outrun that hedonic treadmill. And they found it in a specific kind of meditation. They looked at something called loving kindness meditation, or LKM. Now, this is the really cool part. Unlike just watching a funny movie, LKM is an active skill. It's something you learn to do. It's a practice where you actively train your mind to generate feelings of warmth, kindness, and compassion, first for yourself, and then you start extending it out to others. So you're not just waiting for happiness to show up, you're actually learning how to create it yourself. This slide basically lays out the entire game plan for the research. The core idea, the hypothesis, was that if you practice loving kindness meditation, that will lead to more positive emotions in your daily life. Then, those emotions will help you build up valuable personal resources, like being more mindful or having better friendships. And finally, all of those new resources will lead to something huge, greater overall life satisfaction. It's like a chain reaction.
So, this is the big idea they put to the test. Could learning this skill actually kickstart a kind of upward spiral? A spiral where good feelings that you generate yourself build real-world strengths, which in turn lead to a happier, more fulfilling life. It's a pretty profound question, isn't it? What if we all have the power to consciously build our own well-being, one positive thought at a time? That's exactly what this research set out to find out.
Okay, let's kick things off with the most powerful kind of evidence we have, a meta-analysis from 2015 led by Zeng. Now, if you're not familiar, a meta-analysis is basically a study of studies. So instead of just doing one experiment, researchers gather up all the high-quality studies on a topic and then combine their results to get a much bigger, much more reliable picture of what's going on.
In this case, they pulled the data from 24 separate scientific studies, and all of them were asking the same fundamental question. Does loving-kindness meditation actually boost positive emotions? This approach gives us a real bird's-eye view of the evidence, and it helps cut through the noise you might get from just a single study.
And across all those 24 studies, the total number of people involved was over 1,700. That is a lot of people. And that substantial number gives us a whole lot more confidence in the overall findings than any single small study ever could. And this just shows you how much work goes into it. To get to those 24 high-quality studies, the researchers had to filter through more than 800 published articles. This flowchart really gives you a sense of the scientific rigor here. They're making sure they only look at the best, most solid research.
So after all that work, what did they find? The conclusion was, well, incredibly clear and direct. Across all that data, they found that LKM interventions are in fact effective at enhancing our positive emotions.
And this chart, called a forest plot, visualizes their findings perfectly. Now, don't worry about all the details. Just look at the squares. Each one is a different study. The key thing is that most of them are to the right of that center line, which means they found a positive effect. And that little diamond at the very bottom, that's the combined result of all the studies. It shows a clear, statistically significant positive effect for LKM.
But, the details are where things get really interesting. The researchers noticed that not all kindness meditations are created equal. The practices that were specifically about loving kindness, actively wishing for someone's happiness, had a stronger effect than meditations focused on compassion, which is more about wanting to ease someone's suffering. It's a subtle difference, but the data showed it mattered.
The review also turned up a few other gems. First, even just one short session of LKM can give you an immediate little boost. But here's the surprising part. The total length of the program, whether it was 4 weeks or 8 weeks, didn't seem to make a huge difference in the outcome. What did matter, though, was whether the program included teaching. The ones that actually explained the ideas behind the practice worked better than the ones that just taught the technique. The why seems to be just as important as the how.
Now, any good scientific paper will point out its own weak spots, and this one is no different. They mention a few key things to keep in mind. There's the expectancy effect. If you sign up for a happiness study, you kind of expect to get happier, right? Then there's the fact that the volunteers for these studies are probably more motivated than the average person. And this is a big one. They rated about 39% of the studies as having a high risk of bias in their design.
Okay, so that was the big picture view. We know there's a real effect here. But now let's zoom in and see what one of these studies actually looks like on the ground. We're going to check out a classic randomized controlled trial.
So back in 2015, a study by he and colleagues set up a really clean experiment. They got 50 college freshmen and randomly split them into 2 groups. One group practiced LKM for 30 minutes 3 times a week for 4 weeks. The other group was a control group. They didn't do any meditation. And the researchers measured everyone's emotions and feelings of social connection both before and after the 4 weeks.
And the results? They were just crystal clear. The group that did the loving kindness meditation showed big increases in positive emotions. But get this, it didn't stop there. They also said their interactions with other people got better, and they even had a deeper, more complex understanding of others. And the control group? No real change at all.
So the evidence is definitely building. It seems like this practice works, but that brings up a more subtle question. Is it as simple as more is better? If you just log more hours meditating, do you automatically get more positive feelings?
Well, what's really interesting here comes from a 2017 study led by Barbara Fredrickson. Her team found that while other practices, like mindfulness meditation, also boost positive emotions, LKM often seems to produce a slightly stronger effect. And, get this, that positive gap seems to actually get wider the more you practice. It suggests the benefits of LKM might just compound over time.
Now let's zoom in for a closer look at some specific studies.
If this stuff works for the general population, could it also be a useful tool for people who are really struggling, with diagnosed mood disorders like depression? So to explore this, we're going to look at a 2015 study. Now, right in the title, the authors call this a proof of concept evaluation. And that's a really key phrase in science. It just means this isn't the final answer. It's more of an early, preliminary study to see if an idea is even worth pursuing any further.
So the study took 18 people who'd been diagnosed with depression or dysthymia, which is a kind of chronic, low-grade depression, and had them do an LKM group program. And the results, well, they were really promising. The researchers found large increases in positive affect, and even more striking, they saw very large decreases in the participants' self-reported symptoms of depression. So yeah, the results were pretty exciting.
But, and this is a really big but, we have to look at the caveats. The sample size was tiny, and crucially, there was no control group. That means we can't be sure the improvements were from the LKM and not just, the passage of time or the fact that they were in a supportive group. Plus, a lot of people dropped out. So the takeaway here is the initial signs are very cool, but this is a long, long way from being conclusive proof for clinical use.
Okay, we've looked at the big picture, and we've dug into the nuance. So let's pull it all together and give a final verdict on loving kindness meditation based on the science we have right now. If you're going to remember just a few things from all this, here they are. 1. Our strongest evidence, that big meta-analysis, confirms LKM is an effective way to boost your daily positive emotions. 2. The specific technique really matters. Focusing on loving kindness seems to work better than focusing on compassion. 3. There's good evidence for a compounding effect. The benefits seem to grow the more you practice. And 4. While the clinical potential is super promising, the research is really just getting started and we need a lot more of it.
So, we'll end on this thought. The evidence we've looked at today seems to suggest that our positive emotions aren't just things that happen to us. They might be skills that we can actually deliberately cultivate. And if that's true, well, what does that mean for the future of mental well-being? How could that change our whole approach to happiness? It's a pretty powerful idea to think about.